guys, welcome back to Calicchio's Classroom, and this week we'll be talking about the French Revolution, a time where the government changed more often than a colorblind teacher trying to match his ties to his shirts. Well, thankfully I know this combo works. Right? Alright, let's take a look at the revolution. Now, people often compare the American and French revolutions as similar, and where you can say there are similar themes between the two, there are also glaring differences. French social structure was much more defined than the American counterpart. France was divided up into 3 estates, 1 being the clergy, 2 being the nobility, and 3 being, well, pretty much everyone else. The 3rd estate was, if you took the middle class bourgeoisie, and then the poor, uneducated workers and peasants. Now, the absolute monarch in France was King Louis XVI, and unlike his great-great-grandfather Louis XIV, Louis XVI was a very weak leader. And unfortunately, he was dealt a pretty bad hand due to the fact that his country, or kingdom at this time, had amassed a large debt. To pay for this debt, Louis taxed the 3rd estate, which amassed for about 98% of the kingdom's population. Unfortunately, in 1789, a crop failure occurred, and most of the peasants who were already mad about the tax system were also mad that they didn't have food. So Louis, trying to prevent any sort of riot from breaking out, called the Estates General. And the Estates General was like the French version of a Congress or a parliament, but he also realized that the 3rd estate and the first 2 estates had about the same amount of delegates, which kind of made this deadlock and nothing was going to get done. So he decided to lock out the 3rd estate. They responded by going to an indoor tennis court room and forming the tennis court oath and evolving themselves into the National Assembly. Now, the National Assembly was credited with resisting French troops that came to quell these uprisings, and they were sent by the king. And then they stormed the Bastille, which was way more metaphorically significant than actually significant, since it was pretty much empty. Arguably, abolishing the nobility and their feudal claims was way more awesome, but Bastille Day sounds way better than abolish the nobility day. Also important to know, in 1789, a mob of angry women surrounded the Palace of Versailles and marched the king and queen back to Paris, which is like 26 miles round trip, all for a lack of bread and high bread prices. And also, true story, later that month, a French woman named Tommy Lauren criticized the march as disrespectful to a king that looked out for the interests of a few, citing that the marchers needed a job. Unbelievable, right? Now, regardless, the National Assembly also crafted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, a document that guaranteed the rights of property and liberty for all French citizens. Well, men, hence the name men and citizen. These, of course, would not really apply come 1792. When Louis XVI was executed in 1792 for supposedly aiding the Prussians and Austrians, whom France was in a war against, he was tried and executed, thusly starting the Reign of Terror. The National Convention, which was the newly evolved government from the National Assembly, had proclaimed a new form of government, a republic, one very different from the constitutional or limited monarchy, and very different from the absolute monarchy. This government outlawed religion, and it also changed the measurements of time and the calendar. They also got rid of slavery, which was cool, so yay! But mostly it was kind of chaotic, so understandably boo. Now, over 40,000 people died during this time, and a quarter of them was via the guillotine, which was being authorized by the aptly named Committee of Public Safety, which I say aptly named because it reminds me of a Monty Python skit because of the fact that nobody in the public was safe. Robespierre, the leader of the Committee of Public Safety, actually met his own demise via the guillotine that he used on all those people when he was overthrown via the Thermidors, a political faction of Girondins named after the new month of the calendar which they rebelled in. Now, the National Convention and the Reign of Terror both ended in late 1793, and the Directory was established, which should have worked since it had both an executive and a legislative branch to kind of offer some sort of checks and balances to a government. But due to corruption, this caused a lot of unrest. It's also important to know that during this whole period, France was pretty much fighting the rest of Europe. And if you think about it, from 1789 to 1793, France was having like a mini civil war with all the revolution it was having, as well as fighting almost every other big kingdom in Europe. It's kind of nuts to think about. The Directory would be the new government being formed, and it would last about 5 years until they were overthrown in a coup d'etat by a little Corsican general named Napoleon Bonaparte, and to which he changed the government to be a consulate, where he was first consul. There were 2 other consuls, but they really didn't matter. It was mostly just Napoleon. Eventually, Napoleon would crown himself emperor, but after a series of defeats and the rest of Europe kind of restored the monarchy back to France, with Louis XVIII, brother of Louis XVI, becoming king, meaning that France had literally come full circle, starting as a monarchy, going to a republic, and coming back to a monarchy, or so people would think. In fact, the French government and society had really completely changed. The nobility and clergy lost almost all of their original power that they had in 1789. They lost their ability to have tax breaks. They lost all the land that had been collected through feudal ties. And they also didn't have an absolute monarchy anymore. The new king would be a constitutional monarchy, one that the French revolutionaries of 1789 kind of called for. Despite the protests of Austrian Chancellor Clemens von Metternich, the aftermath of the French Revolution would eventually spread throughout Europe and constantly test kingdoms and nations, starting in the 19th century and lasting all the way as it spread across the world in present-day moments such as the Arab Spring. The French Revolution was also the first time that women like Olympe de Gouges, who was unfortunately another victim of the guillotine, attempted to gain rights. As stated in her Declaration of the Rights of Women and Female Citizen, all citizens, including women, are equally admissible to the public dignities and offices and employments according to their capacity and with no other distinction than that of their virtues and talents, which is something that is still being fought today. Thanks for watching.